And I remind you, this is now, of course, an opportunity for everyone to ask questions of the regulatory authorities. This is a very unique chance, I think. I'm no expert in this, but I would assume it's not every day you have a set of decision makers from 3 regulatory agencies around the North Sea in the same panel. So thank you very much for availing yourselves. And this is a free country. You can say whatever you want. And the microphone's available, and I will direct them as soon as you raise your hands. We have about 15 minutes or so, and everybody is free to speak. I will, damn, there's one there.
Hi, David Harrison with Schlumberger here in Denmark. One of the big challenges we have in the North Sea in terms of being efficiency is the differing regulations between the different countries, the different North Sea shelves, the UK, Denmark and Norway in particular. And I just wondered what the panel here, the different authorities are doing to try and standardize, to make things more efficient.
Did I hear you point towards Norway as the most difficult here?
No.
No, oh sorry, I misunderstood. Anyway, Mr. Holyam, how do we address this issue?
Well, we have the issue of regulations, we have the issue of standards, and if I can put them all together. There are country regulations and standards. There are company standards. There are international standards. Most of the IOCs have common standards throughout the world. They run their standards, the countries run their standards, the suppliers sometimes have their standards.
So what are you going to do about it?
This is a very, very difficult area. And we're working on it, we're trying to sort it out, trying to make standards more aligned. We're trying to move towards international standards. But it's very, very difficult because you see the individual company standards are sometimes tougher than the national standards. And because they might have their own reasons for that. So this thing is very, very complicated. But if we can crack this nut, I think we come a long way in reducing cost.
Ms. Murphy.
I think as well as the actual regulations and standards, there's sort of regulatory approach. And one of the things which we're trying to achieve in setting up the OGA is to deliver a body which is actually much closer to the MPD in the way it approaches regulation. So having a set of powers, but relying very much on influence and on having the right number of people and the people with the right skills to really get in there with industry, to go to the meetings, to influence as you go along. So I think as well as the actual sort of regulations themselves, that sort of closer similarity of approach should make regulation feel more similar in the different jurisdictions.
Which makes me ask the following question to you, because I had the impression when you spoke that Britain is now constructing an agency with much broader powers than the agencies in Norway and Denmark. But perhaps are we only seeing Britain trying to catch up with the systems already in place in Norway and Denmark, where a more, let's say, conciliatory approach has been in place for many, many years?
I think it's, I don't know if it's about sort of catching up. I think it's about sort of looking around at what other people are doing and taking on board the lessons. that from the way other jurisdictions operate to deal with the issues which we're facing. I mean, we, during the review, so Ian went and spent some time certainly in Norway, and myself and my team have been over to talk to some of your colleagues recently. And you know, there are some similarities of issues, that there are also some different issues which we're facing. So for us, with setting up the OGA, we're taking the learning and supplementing it with other things which are perhaps unique to the UK.
Mr. Beck, how are you hearing this? Because I was under the impression that the British new authority, they will use fines, they will levy industry, they will force their way into the boardrooms, they will even punish those who do not comply with recommendations, etc., etc. It sounds very, very sort of regulatory with a big R,
forceful,
capital R, yeah. But perhaps we should look at this in another way. How do you see this?
Well, coming back to the question, I think there's an element here of political logic, if you will, or differences among the countries around the North Sea. It may seem obvious that we should set up one regulatory regime for the North Sea. It's the same basin in general. We're looking at chalk mostly. And so why are we not just setting in place one regulatory framework? 2 countries are members of the EU. Some of this is regulated, for instance, safety issues at the EU level. So there is some regulatory similarities, but how do we carry that out? That also comes down to what do policymakers want in the various countries. So there's a limit from that side to how far can we go in integrating. But it's also fair to say that the 3 parties present here have different challenges ahead of us. The Norwegian sector and the British sectors and the Danish are not the same. We are sort of...
but surely you could use the same standards, even though the fields are not exactly the same.
Of course, there may be an element in that. And I would say in our strategy work now, we're looking very much at how can we copy the good examples from countries around the North Sea. But coming to a sort of one common regulatory framework, I think, is unrealistic, just like it's unrealistic to have the energy union at the EU level in the short.
Would you like to follow up on your question?
I guess my point is there's a lot of potential.
Yeah, I agree.
Improved efficiency.
Yes.
Sorry, can we have a microphone in the room? It's very large. Sorry about that.
Yes, I mean, I think everybody here will agree there's a lot of potential for improved efficiency if we were able to standardize, if there was more harmonization between the regulations and the standards across the North Sea. That's really my point, and it's interesting to see what the different authorities are actually talking to each other at what level.
What do you mean by interesting?
It's interesting, first of all, that the 3 of them are sitting there together, that they're talking to each other, obviously, you know, that things are moving perhaps in the right direction.
You're very polite. Thank you very much. There is a claim that industry, that the companies involved are too slow in working together. You were very blunt in stating this as a fact on the British shelf. I'm sure the other regulatory bodies would have similar issues with industry. Now, what do you intend to do about that? Mr. Holjem.
Working together across licenses is important to maximize value creation. You can have 2 licenses next to each other. There is a discovery in each. They can build each their own, or they can build together. As I tried to say, and as you challenged, we have a way of working together in Norway where there are the ministry, the NPD, and the oil company work very, very closely together. And then we have some regulations that we can lean on. But eventually it is the companies that will have to make the decision. But yes, we are leaning on companies to work together. Sometimes that's very easy. It's easy when they see that they can create additional value. But if these are 2 small companies and that these fields are company makers individually, then it becomes very, very difficult.
Can you be slightly more specific here? In what particular areas are companies presently too poor at working together?
I think they're too poor in working together in developing fields and working together in using joint facilities jointly.
Right. Ms. Murphy.
Yes, I think that one of the key roles for the OGA is going to be to bring companies together and very much facilitate that collaboration. We've talked a lot, and you mentioned earlier the powers that the OGA will have, and yes, it must have those powers, but we would see it as a sign of failure if the OGA has to use those powers very frequently.
You'd rather be nice like the Norwegians?
We'd like to be sort of nice in the way that the Norwegians are nice. So I think very much it's going to be a question of influencing and of bringing people to the table. I mean, when we talk to industry, there's will there for collaboration, but for whatever reason, it's just not quite happening. So a regulator who is specifically charged with bringing people together, facilitating those discussions, and then underpinning it will be the MER UK strategy, where there will be a legal duty on the regulator and also on industry to adhere to the strategy. And the strategy will set out the kinds of things which are in the interests of maximising economic recovery, and that will focus very much on collaboration. So there will be sort of something to underpin the need for greater collaboration.
Mr. Beck, in which fields are companies on the Danish shelf too poor at working together today?
Well, I think I agree with the two previous speakers that there are some areas that we should look into, and we're doing that in the strategy work that we're now in process with. But I'd say, as I also said in my intervention, I think we've already tried to make it very clear how access for third parties should be to infrastructure. We did that in 2011. So we're trying to make regulation extremely clear, so that it's clear to everybody that there should be access and on what conditions. But can we do more? Certainly. And this is one of the three pillars, main pillars in our strategy work, to look at how infrastructure can be shared and make sort of the conditions for that very clear to everyone.
Infrastructure, can you be more specific in
pipes?
No, I know what infrastructure is,
right.
But in what sense are companies not good enough at working together?
Well, I think it's a matter, of course, of a business case. You know, is for the owning company of a pipeline, for instance, what should be the access given to others, and how do you read the regulation? You may read it one way, and the party interested in using that infrastructure may read it another way. And there, as a regulator, what we can do is install clarity in that process.
Clarity in that process. And clarity, does that also involve, let's say, clear orders or instructions or, let's say, regulatory questions to a greater degree? Is that where the strategy will be headed?
I think the nice questions are probably more related to another part of the exploration, but I hope that we don't end up having to use force, but in the strategy process that we've now entered into, this is one of the areas that we're looking at. How can we better the cooperation among operators of the infrastructure?
Right. Last chance is approaching. Yes, please. Up here. Oh, sorry. Was there one? I missed you. Please go ahead, and we will have the microphone up here in front.
I just wanted to ask the...
Sorry,
sorry?
Could you tell us who you are?
I'm Sven Løkkemark Christensen from Danoil.
Thank you.
I was listening very carefully to this OGA construction, and the way I heard you, you also have the competences and the power to go and regulate the politicians and their civil servants. And I mean, that's what a lot of us here in this room actually also are wondering, who is regulating the politicians and their civil servants and the NGOs? Who's doing that? Is that something that you will be able to help on?
Gosh.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. You have a few seconds to think about that. And we'll have the second question here. We're approaching the end of this session. So what's the word? I'm making you speak faster. Yes.
Okay. My name is Flemming Horn Nielsen with Dong E&P. Listening to the previous sessions, we heard that some of the majors are pulling out of the North Sea, and we see smaller companies entering. That can either be purely investment companies, or it could be small operators. Now, in the light of Macondo and the risk and reward picture of the North Sea, how do you see that development, and are you comfortable with that?
Thank you very much. Can we do it this way? I'll ask you to answer the first question, and I'll allow the gentleman to answer the second one.
Sure. Well, certainly one of the roles of the OGA is going to be to provide advice and, where necessary, constructive challenge to ministers and to civil servants. That would be to ministers in the Department for Energy and Climate Change on matters of energy policy, and also to ministers in the Treasury on fiscal policy. Now, that's not the same as sort of regulating politicians, but what it is aimed to deliver is an expert body which can make sure that high-level sort of policy decisions which ministers are taking and which ministers will continue to take are based on a firm understanding of what the implications will be for the industry. So better informed policy making is the desired outcome.
Thank you very much. Second question. Are the new investors, the new companies, the new actors, are they going to screw up?
I hope not. We have quite a few companies active on the Norwegian continental shelf now. We actually made a change of some of the policies in 2004, and we now have 50 or 60 companies. They're small companies, they're medium-sized companies, and they're large companies. We made one change to the regulation after Macondo, and that was that if you are in a deep water license and you're going to drill, you need to have deep water drilling experience. The operator and one of the partners need to have that. That's the only change we made after Macondo.
But is that sufficient? Well. I mean, the gentleman stated in a very short sentence what the analyst spoke about for a long time, which is that we're looking at new investors, new types of companies, new small operators, because of the special conditions in the North Sea. How are you making sure that this will work out?
We're making sure when we put together the license groups that the new ones come together with experienced companies in the same license. So we always have experience in the license. There will never only be new and small companies in one license that are going to drill any of these risky wells.
Mr. Beck.
I think at this point, this is not a concern for us. I think we need more and also smaller operators and investors in the North Sea, at least in the Danish part. So I'm not so concerned at this point. And I think also following Macondo, there's actually been a change in EU regulations. And these operators have to follow exactly the same regulations. So, leaning on what Arne has already said, which I completely agree with, I think we are not concerned, certainly not at this point.
Ladies and gentlemen, help me thank the three regulators for addressing us so coherently. Thank you very, very much.